Well, welcome back. Thanks for joining me a little bit earlier. I'm here, of course, back with our good friend, Dr. Paul Cottrell. And yeah, I'm obviously one of us is in need of a haircut. I'll let you guys on the audio figure out who. But yeah, thanks a lot for dropping by tonight, Paul. It's been a little while since we chatted. So for my audience, if you could just remind everyone about your history and vital statistics.
Well, my blood pressure is 122 over 80, and
we'll be measuring that over the course of the show and see how that goes, depending on the comments.
But for the ones that don't know me, I have a YouTube channel and I talk about current events. But recently, it's been about the COVID-19 crisis since January 25th, and I've been publishing almost every day. But I've been, a little bit busy recently because of some school work that I've been working on. But my background is I have an undergrad from Wayne State University in management and electives in engineering, mechanical engineering. I have an MBA in finance, a PhD in finance. My PhD is from Walden University. My undergrad and MBA is from Wayne State University from Detroit. And finishing up my master's degree from Harvard University, specializing in biology. And I finished the pre-med program at Fordham University. So this is, I'm transitioning away from the financial world. I live in New York City, did proprietary trading, managed a portfolio for a very large nonprofit, and which happened to be Catholic Charities, but because of what happened to my brother, he died from heart disease at a young age, at age 36. I'm pursuing medicine, so that's my scholastic background, and I have something to say about current events that's going on in this world, and part of a network that you're a part of, and that's trying to inform the public about what's going on and the erosion of the civil liberties and the geopolitical play that's taking place, the financial destruction that's taking place. There's a lot of topics to talk about with this current crisis. It's not just the virus, but there's a lot of sociological, psychological and philosophical aspects to this that need to be discussed.
Right. I'm sorry. If I heard the story of your brother, it didn't register, so I just wanted to express my sympathies. Is that a family history thing? Is this something you're at risk for as well? Or was he spectacularly unhealthy? Was it a random thing? I mean, how did that come about?
It runs on my mother's side of the family. A lot of the males get heart disease at a younger age, and it's based on some risk factors. One of the biggest risk factors is high carbohydrate diet. And then there's a lot of inflammation, there's plaque buildup, and then it just advances very quickly. And so the ones that don't get a stent or a bypass usually die young, in between 35 and 45. And that's what happened to my brothers, is that he wasn't able to get the PCI, the stent, in enough time. Unfortunately, he had a minor heart attack 1 month before he had his major heart attack.
And was it just like a erase the whiteboard kind of thing when he had the big one, or was it touch and go, or how did that play out?
No. It was it was in July of 2010. He wasn't feeling well. It was hot. They had a heat wave in Michigan. He lived about 20 minutes away from my parents. So he left work at about 6:00 p.m. He usually worked late. He was an accountant. And asked my parents to come over. He wasn't feeling well. And they came over. My father thought that he had just indigestion because my brother was always eating fast food. He wasn't married. He
fast food and a desk job. Ooh.
Yeah, I know. So I mean, he gained weight. He had he had the hypertension and everything. So my mother stayed with him, and my father went to the store to get like a Maalox or Pepto-Bismol or something like that, because he had Chipotle, for lunch. And, my father was thinking, well, it must have been indigestion or something. And 20 minutes later, he died. He died with my mother, and my father, comes, through the door, and, he's already dead. Then the EMS, comes, and they were, they pumped his heart with the adrenaline to try to get it to restart. But I mean, after multiple times, they worked on him for about 45 minutes before they called it. But yeah, it's something that runs on my mother's side of the family. My cousin Marky, my cousin Sheldon, they all had heart attacks at a young age 40, and Sheldon, he was a little bit fitter. He used to be a marathon runner. He had his heart attack at age 50 and needed the triple bypass. Well,
wait, so being a marathon runner in your family buys you about 8 years? Like that?
Yeah,
that's
it? That's about it. And my mother had her heart attack at age 40. She's had 4 of them. She has 5 stints. And then my uncle Jack, he passed away at age 46 on a racquetball court. And my uncle Blair, he died at age 35 from the same problem.
Wow. Okay, well, hopefully we'll make it through the end of the show. You feeling okay?
No, I'm feeling okay.
Man.
No, I'm feeling all right. Okay. That's that was kind of the reason why I said, the blood pressure thing. Because I have my blood pressure, checked regularly, and I have a cardiologist, and we do stress tests, and I mean it's checked regularly. Unfortunately, my brother Dan, who's the one that passed away, he has a twin. His name's Joel. And
wait,
Joel,
his name is, so he's a current. You're talking current tense, not past tense. Okay,
yeah, so Joel is still alive, but he went into the military right after high school. Dan did
lots of movement.
Right. So he was much fitter. Dan kind of started gaining the weight, never lost it, and it just compounded. Well, Joel's married, has kids, is busy working, he's gained the weight. And he's got the hypertension, and he's on blood thinners, and he's got, the high blood pressure, and he's showing all the signs that Dan had when Dan was around 25. So, it's just like, and Joel's now 46 right now.
Yeah, the weight thing is a killer. Maybe we'll do a whole other show on weight thing, but yeah, the weight thing is a killer. And what you can take for granted. I remember I had a director. He was my one of my English professors when I was in undergrad, and he directed me in a Harold Pinter play. And I was a broke student, and I would go to the hot dog cart, right? And for $2. Like seriously, you could get because you'd get a big bun, you'd get the big sausage, and I would pile it high with all like tomatoes and onions and chili and lettuce and everything, cheese, just because I could do like 3/4 of a day on $2, which was actually kind of important in my entire budget at the time. There's only so many women you can date who've got script money, so you can eat and all that. I'm just a gigolo for like cafeteria food, but I remember my professor was looking at me, and he was, I guess, my age now. And this is back when I was like 20 or 21 or whatever. And he was looking at me, going in like a shark on a baby seal on this giant hot dog with everything on it, right? And he was like, man, enjoy it while you can. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'll have the same digestion when no, I won't. I really, really won't. And basically the entire process of aging, it's like, the rockets go up, and then they drop these stages, right? Because, you've burned it out and you drop it. So the whole point of getting older is, I used to like that. Sorry. None for you anyway. No soup for you. And the things I used to eat, like I can't even imagine anymore. Like I don't keep chips or cookies or chocolate or anything, like none of that stuff. And you can't have it. You can't have it around. It's just, you've got to just say goodbye to all of that stuff. Like you're dropping some useless stage. And for me, bursting up through the sort of strata of the decades is just dumping stuff. Oh, I can't have that anymore. I can't have that anymore. No more white bread, right? And that's what you got to do. But a lot of people are just like, they keep the food constant no matter what else they're doing. And that's just a disaster.
No, it's shit. And I don't know if you have Taco Bell in Canada, right?
Toxic-Hell, yes, that's
Okay.
what it's sometimes
So
called.
yeah,
But I
well,
think it's quite a
back
long
in
way from the Montezuma's revenge food of the original Incas.
all
But
right.
yeah, we do have
Well,
it.
but the thing is, Dan and Joel, when they, this is the, let's say, early 90s. I mean, you for $20, you could eat like a king at
Oh yeah,
Taco Bell. Talking about,
I think specifically Henry VIII is who we're talking about as far as the king goes. You get your gout as on your way to the car.
right.
Your carts just explode. All right. Well, let's get on with. So I was actually, because you and I first did a show. I don't know, boy, it was like, I don't know, March or something like that. So we've had a whole character arc, like we've had a whole plot arc here. Like we're on the third of the trilogy set on the world stage here. And I was thinking about like some of the early stuff that we talked about. Where are you with regards to what you thought was going to happen, how it's playing out? And I mean, obviously we go into the future, but let's just do a quick, the objects in the mirror may be closer than they appear. How does it seem to you when you're looking back upon how you thought it was going to play out?
That's a great question. Some things we got right, some things we didn't get right. The things that we did get right were there was a man-made virus that eventually turned and bifurcated as a weapons program. The weapons program stopped in the United States at around the end of 2014 and continued in China at the Wuhan lab, the P4 lab, by Dr. Shi. That virus leaks out. We don't know why it leaked out, but it did. And eventually it spread across the world. So we got that right.
Now,
In
hang on,
terms of
because,
the infection,
sorry to interrupt. I've just asked you, but let me sort of play the devil's advocate here, right? So I've kind of been tracking this story, of course, and there are a number of very prominent people who come out and say, look, the odds of this thing coming out of nature are virtually zero. We haven't found the intermediate species and so on. But it's not, to me, from what I've seen, lots of indications, lots of experts, but a lot of people believe that whether COVID or SARS-CoV-2, whether that is man-made, to a lot of people is not like a done deal. It's not like 100%. So where do you sit with that?
I have the paper that I sent you when we were doing the kind of
The case against China stuff, right?
the case
Yeah, yeah.
against China, and that paper that was published in 2008, that's on my website, that states that they took bat SARS-like virus, coronavirus, made a chimera plasmid, infected 293 T cells. It's a type of T cell with a pseudovirus HIV vector. They infected those 293 T cells, and what happened? They had a big plate, many different cells. They were selectively finding and having that cell combine the two, the plasmids from the coronavirus, the chimera, and the HIV homology. It finds its way and recombines. And then they select with another cell line, another 293 cell line that is expressing different ACE2 receptors of different species. So they were able to program these cell lines to express human ACE2, overexpress human ACE2, or overexpress two other ACE2 animal cell lines. Okay? And this is important. Okay? Remember that, because this is how the scientific community is hiding and using the zoonotic theory to hide the weapons program. Now, what happened was in the paper, they selected which combination had the highest affinity to the ACE2 human receptor on the 293 cell line, and then was able to do backwardation and find out how to tweak it. Okay, now this is the early development. Now what's out there is a far more advanced version of what I'm talking about, but this was happening in a lab in 2007 and published in 2008. 2008. Okay. Now, fast forward, more research is done with that particular line. And it's not just this line. There were many labs at about the same time that were doing scientific research on understanding why the bat host was able to live with coronaviruses. Okay. This particular paper was saying if we take the best of both worlds, a very good replicates coronavirus with a very good spike protein coronavirus, and we mixed it with a furin cleavage point that happens to need the HIV homology, would we be able to jump species? And that paper showed yes. That's the key. But they also had these other 293 cell lines that had other species ACE2 receptors being expressed. So you had another set of lines. You follow me? You have another set of lines that would say, oh, we have something that's similar to the ACE2 human affinity virus with the HIV homology, and another line that is attached to another species. And you had 3 or 4 of these lines being in development. Okay, so when China said, well, we have a sequence that was from a cave, from another bat that happens to have one of the HIV homology inserts, that was from some of the older work that was taking place. Follow me? Mm-hmm. They, when they make these lines, they freeze them, and for further study and investigation and sequencing and all this. So it's not just you're talking about hundreds of lines that were developed, okay? But certain ones were so good, they were further developed and then bifurcated and further developed. So this was in vitro. Then you had in vivo development when you're starting to get to the DOD, where you're doing primate stuff now. Now you're not just doing it in a petri dish. What I was talking about in 2008 is the petri dish. Now it's, okay, we're going to now select for higher affinity, higher lethality with primates. The program gets shut down, and then it goes over to Wuhan. So it's not just in vivo. It's not just one line. There were multiple lines that were expressing different ACE2 receptors from different chimeras, different species, and further developed. Okay, so I take it from the 2008 paper as the genesis point, but there is an argument where you could take it even further than that, but it doesn't matter. The point is that the scientific community made it. Now, what was the reason that they made it in 2008? I'm still willing to say that it was for scientific purposes to understand how to prevent if it jumps species, so they could design pharmaceuticals or therapeutics. But I think because coronaviruses are the common, so common, like the cold, or the common cold, that there was an incentive to make it into a weapons program. And this is where the hydroxychloroquine comes in. And I don't think a lot of people talk about this, but some of the people, the experts behind the scenes do. The military's answer to this, when this was being developed by the DOD, was hydroxychloroquine. That is the answer. So if it's a weapon, they don't want the enemy to say prophylactically use hydroxychloroquine. The cat's out of the bag already, but don't use they don't want the enemy to use hydroxychloroquine prophylactically if they had the intent to unleash it as a weapon. You follow me?
Yeah. Okay. So, but wouldn't it also be the case? I mean, again, devil's advocate position, Paul. Wouldn't it also be the case? You say, okay, well, it's not really that great a weapon if like a really common malaria medication can keep you safe. It's like, well, it's like, okay, it's an atomic bomb, but you got an umbrella and you're fine. That would be an argument, I think, against how could it be that great a weapon if you've got a very common and patent-free drug that you can treat it with?
Well, the thing is it depends on how you were going to implement. You got to remember that this came out of a lab with the assumption that it was accidentally leaked out because of a safety issue at the P4.
Like the bat bit someone in the lab.
The question, right. So, and someone left the lab and then spread it. That's the theory. All right. So, but it leaked out. All right. But let's say it was contained. Let's say in theory, we had the government be able to contain it. And it was wrapped up, and no one could touch it. All right. And they decided to unleash it. All right. It would weaken the society that they're unleashing quick enough to be able to move your military operations to do whatever it needed to. And that your military and your society is already prophylactically using the hydroxychloroquine. So the chances of your society, the one that's unleashing the weapon, being adversely affected is much less than your enemy, because it's a matter of who gets sick first and for how long. Right. But your point is right, that bioweapons in general are very bad weapons because you can't control it up to a certain point. It spreads all over the place and eventually affects your society. Same thing with, I would say, same thing with nuclear weapons. The radiation drifts. You can't say radiation, I only want you to cross 59th Street and 7th Avenue. It doesn't work that way. It drifts, it diffuses. So, these weapons of mass destruction, there is this. It can come back, to the actual individual or country that unleashes it. So as a weapon, you're right, it's a poor weapon. But the thing is that hydroxychloroquine was the antidote. And you got to remember back when we were doing operations with Desert Shield and Desert Storm, that Saddam Hussein had chemical weapons. So there wasn't this, the Defense Department, the Pentagon does these, does these simulations and game theory on how to use these types of weapons if needed. Right. And then in the so back to the original question is like what because of this big arc. Another thing that I found out recently is that the very first testing in New York was at a very famous hospital, a medical center. All right, I'm not going to name the name because but I know the person personally that did the testing with the RT-PCR of the first case in New York City. All right. From that medical, because they live they work in the pathology department, and they were given hydroxychloroquine with CPAC and zinc. The whole medical staff that was dealing with the testing prophylactically, and I find that extremely important information.
When was that?
When was the first testing taking place in New York? That was in February. Right. This is New York City, not New York State. I'm talking New York State, New York City's first case.
Because I was just watching the TV the other day. I think it was yesterday, and there was somebody who's like, "Oh no, we've had to move on to remdesivir because hydrochloroquine has not proven to be effective and so on." So, what's the story? Because there does seem to be a lot of pushback against the efficacy of hydrochloroquine.
Well, as we were talking behind the scenes, a couple of weeks ago, I'm privy to some information because of my scholastic studies, and have participated in some grand rounds by physicians that actually treat COVID-19 patients. All right. And hydroxychloroquine has been told to the community, I'm talking about the medical community, that it works most of the time, especially if you do it early. The problem is that if you make a study and it's only of severe cases, you're going to have poor outcomes. And that's what Fauci was doing with the study.
Oh, okay.
Not looking at,
to
not looking.
analogize it, it's like, you got those little under the sink fire extinguishers, and they're great for a grease fire on your stove. But if half your house is burning down, hey, they don't work, right? Is it sort of like that?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Exactly. And it's a very cheap drug. All right. It's very, very cheap. Pennies a pill or whatever, less than pennies a pill or whatever. So the big pharma is going to make a lot of money on that. All right. And but we have to mention that hydroxychloroquine is not a magic bullet for everybody. You got to catch it early. And for some people, you can't take hydroxychloroquine because you have other issues, because of other medication you're on, or it doesn't metabolize right with you. All right. So it's not for everybody, but for a lot of individuals, if you catch it early, it can help. And this is a fact. The medical establishment has shown this. And anyone that's saying it, they're either deplatformed, banned, or see, you've heard about Dr. Gold. She, was, had that video and that conference, and she lost her job. As a physician, stating things that she saw in her own practice. It wasn't like she read a paper and said, okay, this is, what the French are saying. She's saying, this is what I'm seeing.
There's a doctor up here in Canada who's been tweeting about some of this stuff, and she's got a complaint, and it's rough, man. It's rough trying to get this information out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there's cardiologists that are also saying that some of the adverse side effects that individuals were worried about because of this, what they call the QT prolonged wave, where individuals that are in bradycardia, slow heart rates could cause problems. You have slow heart rates, bradycardia, tachycardia is, faster heart rates. So if you have this, slower heart rate issue, it may cause problems. But even the cardiologists, if you manage this correctly, you could still take hydroxychloroquine. So, even the cardiologists, and that's where most of the side effects are, is cardiac. But, the medical community is saying, hey, this should be in our toolbox. It shouldn't be. What's happening is that Fauci is stating you can build your house, but you can't use a hammer. You can only use a saw and a screwdriver, but you can't have a hammer, And what these doctors need is everything in the toolbox to be able to tweak their treatment for that particular patient, because not all patients are the same. So a lot has been learned since we've talked about behind the scenes what was really going on with hydroxychloroquine. Now, with the remdesivir and some other therapeutics, they are targeting a little bit more of the protease, inhibition, which is important. And we should have that in the toolbox.
I'm so sorry. Protease inhibition. I'm afraid that footnote is not kind of showing up for me at the moment. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So you need protease inhibitors. So how the virus makes some of its proteins active has to fold them correctly. So they have to cleave certain parts and fold the protein correctly. The protease is the scissor. A protease inhibitor would prevent the scissor from working, and therefore the folding wouldn't happen. And therefore the virus is inactive or has less activity. So remdesivir and other therapeutics is more targeted for this protease inhibition mechanism. MOA, uh, mechanism of action. So, so they should have that in their toolbox. And what's interesting is that we had Donald Trump today speak a few hours before we, started this broadcast, where he was saying, hey, the therapeutics are, moving along just fine too, and that he even mentioned it in the speech. I'm that he wants those therapeutics to hit the market, that he doesn't want to put everything in the vaccine, basket, as the answer. While Fauci is a little bit more on I want the Moderna messenger RNA vaccine, and is kind of poo-pooing some of the other therapeutics. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately for him, unfortunately for us, he has patents on certain key elements to the furin cleavage point, spike protein, glycoprotein 120, HIV. He's got a lot of patents on this stuff.
Wait, sorry. Let me just make sure I follow this. So Dr. Fauci has patents on stuff that has more value if it's the sole way of dealing with the illness.
Yeah. Yeah.
You probably have had the lecture as much as I have over the years that, conflict of interest seems to be kind of a significant problem when it comes to objectivity in this kind of area. How is this getting past muster? How is this getting past an committee? How is this? Just step me through this if you dare.
Okay, so he has a lot of different patents, all right, and a lot of other researchers, as they were developing this stuff in the lab, have patents, all right, sequences, special inhibitors or chemicals that can stop a process, and what they do is they take that grant money. They do their research, and then they spin something off in a biotech company. Now, specifically for Fauci, what he did was he's on a patent, and then he signs ownership, the residuals that would be made off the patent, to the department that he works for. Okay, so he works under the NIH. Okay, so the NIH, or one of the departments under that umbrella, gets the royalties of it, okay? But here's the thing: how he gets around it is that there's that back clause where he can be paid in certain ways to get the money. So the pharmaceutical company, Moderna, can't write a check to Fauci for a patent payment. They would write it to the NIH, and the NIH gives it to Fauci through his funding mechanisms or his own salary. It's around. It's secondary now. It's not primary. It's not a primary transaction. So, but he's got other researchers that he's worked with that spun off biotech companies. And what's odd is how do these biotech companies know exactly what to do when the crisis happened? And go, oh, we can create these therapeutics really quick. Well, they're still trying to figure out how to solve the AIDS problem, right? And that's been since the 80s or the 70s, depending on how you count it. But it started doing its manifestation in the early 80s. They don't have a cure for HIV, all right? And we've thrown tons of money at it. Well, they developed the virus in the lab. They knew exactly what they needed to look for to help solve the problem because they made it. And then all they have to do is, here's the antidote with the startup. And this is happening with distribution. This is happening with Moderna. There's a lot of these people. It's like a revolving door. They get the funding, do this research when they're the professor at the universities, and then they start a biotech company, and then they make a ton of money.
Let's It's kind of a jump. It's kind of not a jump, because I'm sure you heard that it was just today that Vladimir Putin has put out that, boy, have they ever got a vaccine for people. And it's just moving into phase 3, and his daughter's taken it apparently, and a whole bunch of volunteers for the first responders have taken it. Very little side effects, some soreness in the injection points, a little elevated fever for a day or so. And they've used harmless coronaviruses as the model for delivering the, it's funny because I was reading this and I was trying to explain it to my 11-year-old daughter using, bag of keys and locks. And then at some point I'm like, you know what, I don't know what I'm talking about at this point. So can you just, if you've had a chance to look at that, I mean, what is it that they claim to have achieved? Is it a viable approach to use these inert coronaviruses as a method of delivering this vaccine? Do you think it's going to hold, or what are your thoughts on this?
Well, their vaccine program is very. I did a little show this morning about it when the news announcement came out. Their program is very similar to what Oxford's doing. They're doing a DNA vaccine, not a messenger RNA vaccine. Most vaccines, there's different types of vaccines, but these types of vaccines, it's not uncommon to have kind of like I'll call it a neutered, virus, and it's packaged in a vaccine, and it will stimulate our immune system, our adaptive immune system, to recognize certain proteins, and then we would start to build antibodies. These neutered viruses can't replicate, all right, that are in the vaccine, all right. This has been a method of production and vaccine program for a long time, for decades, So the theory is correct, the methodology and the manufacturing is there. It's been a proven technique. The problem comes in is what if as the manufacturer, and this is where Mikovits comes in, what happens when the manufacturing is faulty and you get some live stuff in, or other things, because you're putting them in cells. When they make these things, it's going through a cell line. What happens, whatever it's going through, the filtration system it's going through is faulty.
Oh, it's like, yeah, like you're shooting a war movie, and every now and then a real bullet comes out. It's like for the extras, man.
Right. So if like anything in manufacturing, it has to be within tolerance to maintain quality. Yeah. But over time, if you're not recalibrating systems or machinery or whatever, it will drift. Your manufacturing process will drift out of that tolerance band for safety. Well, this is where Mikovits is mentioning, hey, some of these things can drift out, and you may actually have something live in there, something not right, or something that is recombined with something else that is something that you never anticipated to happen. That's where she gets into the XMRV stuff, that it was a recombination through a manufacturing process that happened that no one knew about. It asks the philosophical question, who's watching these people that are making these viruses and assuring vaccine safety? That what's the intent as the years go by, that the manufacturing of these things are maintained. So, and we need to, they're unfortunately, the oversight is very, very poor. There's supposed to be annual oversight being done by Congress, and it's not being done. That came out in the news.
Oversight on the manufacturing process of the vaccines in America, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in Russia, they would do it in Russia. I think there are 5 other countries that they're looking at reproducing this with. They're going to test it in United Arab Emirates, I think, Saudi Arabia, a couple other places. Mm-hmm. Highly authoritarian places, let it just be noted. These may not be entirely voluntary people who are like, if you want to get out of prison, I guess if you're get COVID, you get out of prison in the Democrat cities too. But the approach is safe. But my gosh, I mean, I did look this up, like before the show, like, as you know, that there's like more than a dozen vaccines against common human ailments, but only one illness has ever been eradicated, smallpox, and that took like 15 years of highly coordinated international efforts at a time when the international community seemed to be getting along a little bit better than it is now, and the World Health Organization had more credibility because it wasn't being run by a complete Marxist lunatic. But is it really feasible to think that this, let's say the vaccine works as well as a smallpox vaccine, it's still 15 years, eruptions, and and that's intense coordinated effort, and it just, I don't know, it just seems like it's still a long way off, even if it's as good as everyone thinks.
Well, don't get me wrong. I didn't say that the Russian vaccine was safe. What I was saying is that the theory of neutering a live virus and putting it in, and so it can't replicate, and putting it in the body, the theory of it has been proven out.
Right.
This particular virus and all of its nuances through its manufacturing has not been proven. There is no proof whatsoever yet that a large clinical trial with assembled spike proteins on some sort of conjugated system, whatever that system is, put in the human body, there's no evidence that long term it doesn't cause harm. And I've mentioned, I think on your show, and I've mentioned it on other shows, and Mike Adams' show, that there is something called antibody enhancement, where you can build an antibody and you can enhance the actual virus to get into the body. All right, because it attaches, the antibody attaches to the virus, and then it has the topology that matches that's the key, matches the lock that's on the surface of a cell, and it allows it to come in to the cell easier. Antibody induced enhancement is the terminology.
It's like the security system that opens the locks for the burglar. Excellent.
Yeah, sort of.
Not high up on the free market list of things you want around your house.
But I think what's more likely to happen, and this is where I'm worried about, is a lot of people have heard about people getting vaccinated, and they have these peripheral or central nervous system disorders, and it attacks the myelin sheath around the axon. Now, a big reason, not the only reason, but a big reason for this is that you have an antibody that's created from the vaccine, all right, and it so happens that it's attacking the myelin sheath, and your own body that was trying to fight the virus is now fighting it itself. All right, and this is, Guillain-Barré syndrome, or Epstein-Barr virus. There's MS is associated with these autoimmune disorders. There's a big class of autoimmune disorders that are associated with some sort of infection triggering event where an antibody is created to fight the pathogen, but it's close enough where it's going to attack certain types of tissue. And that's where I'm worried about, is that if we don't do rigorous testing and have that long term, we don't know for sure that whatever they're putting in people's body doesn't trigger these negative externalities that we're talking about.
Now, and I get that. Obviously, I mean, everybody would love it to be, I mean, this is pointless to say from my standpoint, everyone would love it to be bulletproof. But here's the thing, Paul. I mean, I feel like a lot of these discussions, and I'm, again, very sensitive to the safety element of things. It's like, yes, but our economy is collapsing and people aren't getting health care, and people are getting gun disease from wearing these masks all day. And it's like, sure, it would be great, but, you kind of go to war with the army that you have, as the old saying goes. And I mean, as you know, the unintended consequences, the negative externalities, of course, of all of these lockdowns and this and that, it's like, I mean, I'm with you, man. Like, let's keep it safe. But part of me is just like, let's just roll the dice, man, because
Well,
if we keep this stuff up, I mean, you know that the number of people, we got 100 million people who are about to fall into extreme poverty because of all these lockdowns. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Let's just roll the dice. I mean,
I'm right with you. I'm right with you.
I just want to get that perspective out there. Caution, I agree with, but
no, I'm right with you. But see, here's the thing: is that this problem is so multifaceted, and as we started the show, there's a lot of variables that have to be weighed in, and they don't have equal coefficients. Some variables are more heavily weighted than others. Okay, in terms of vaccine safety, there's enough evidence to say that we need further testing to assure that we have a safe vaccine program, especially if it's forced on us, if it's mandatory.
yeah, there is that. There is
okay.
that.
All right. So let's keep that straight. That's why I'm so forceful on the safety aspect of this, because I think this is going to end up being a mandatory situation. Now, even if the federal government doesn't state that it's going to be mandatory, someone who is working for an employer will have a corporate lawyer say, in their insurance company, say, we're worried about being sued by whoever, and we're going to force all employees to have a vaccine. And what recourse, if you're an employee that's struggling, to say, no, I'm not, and they get laid off, and let's say they even sue, it's going to be in the courts for a couple years or more, and they've already lost their home. So they're over a barrel. They don't really have a choice. The federal government doesn't even have to force it.
Let's not forget too, sorry to interrupt, but let's not forget as well that even the quote safest of vaccines have pretty negative effects on a significant number of people. Now, by significant, I don't mean like it's high percentage, but even if it's only 0.5% or, 0.25% or whatever, when you're talking about billions of people getting a vaccine, that's still a hell of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. That is, I don't know if you've broken out those numbers, but I mean, we could be talking significant millions and millions and millions of people. Even if the vaccine reaches its top level of safety relative to other safe vaccines, you're still going to have a huge amount of negative side effects just because of the roll the dice nature of human DNA.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you'll probably have around anywhere from 1 to 3% some level of injuredness from this vaccine, even if it's quote safe. All right. Because everybody's biochemistry is slightly different, and the development of that particular antibody is going to be different and all that.
All right, let's
there's a whole slew.
Do some live math here. Okay, that's really because
But I would say the far majority. I would say more. I would say let's say we have 330 million people in the United States. All right. If there is a 3% possibility of being injured to some degree, that would get us to how many, roughly?
Well, what are we at? 7 billion in the world at the moment? Is it
you want to do it worldwide? Okay.
Worldwide. Yeah.
All right. So that's all right. Let's say 7 billion.
So we got 7 billion. So let's say I just did 7 billion times
3%.
So
okay,
I just
want 2%.
We'll sort of take the middle of the round, right?
Okay.
So we got 140 million people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's almost half the population of the United States.
Right. And about 2/3 of those would be like arthritic pain or something like that.
And that can be debilitating. That
right.
Can be, we got 140 million people. If the vaccine is at a very high level of safety, we've got 140 million people around the world who are going to be experiencing some significant negative effects from this, and some portion of those, it's going to be fatal. I mean, again, who knows what it's going to be, and what do we got in America? 330 million these days?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's do that. We'll do the same sort of numbers. We got 330. Thank heavens for comments. All right. Times, I'm more of an art guy. All right. But so then we have 6.6 million Americans, assuming that everybody's going to get this thing at some point. You've got 6.6 million.
Right.
Americans.
And about 1/3 of those will have a more severe side effect
And that's
from
3.2 million. I can actually do that in my head.
yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that's 3.2 million people who are going to have significant, and that's what I mean. Of course, that's less than the total infections in the U.S. at the moment, which I think are cruising north of 5 million, but it's vastly larger than the death count of, what is it, 155, something like that at the moment, 155,000.
Yeah, it's over 150,000. So, you know,
So sorry. So the point is that even if we get, this is, I really want people to get, even if we get everything that we want, as far as it's a vaccine at the top level of safety, it's really effective and so on, millions of people are getting sick because of this thing. And some of those are going to get seriously sick. Some of them are going to die based on the ideal cure, or not cure, but preventive, right? We can't really call a vaccine a cure, but that's the simple, like, boy, because there is no getting out of this without bodies. There is no getting out of this without sickness. Even if we get everything, and the odds we get everything that we want are not super high. We'll have to see how this goes, but there is no way out of this without a massive amount of suffering, a massive amount of sickness. And that's, I'm not trying to freak people out. It's just, at some point, you got to sit down with people and you got to say, hey, you're going to survive this thing, but we're going to take some toes or whatever it's going to be like this, that there is no way out of this. Like, we can rewind. Sorry about the rant, but I just...
No. I am 100% with you. I did a video yesterday, all right? And I said that we have to pay homage to the individuals that sacrificed during World War II. They had to fight fascism, and there were many people that stormed the beaches of Normandy, and they knew when they were getting off those boats that they were going to die. So, the thing is that we've been living high on the hog for so long, and that everything has been handed to the last 2 or 3 generations since World War II, depending on how you count it, that maybe it's time for us to pay the piper, in a strange, philosophical way. But there is this need to take risk. We have to take risk because it's not just the virus. We have now, the economy is hurting big time. All right. Second quarter GDP came out, and in the United States, and it's worse in some other countries, but in the United States, it was a negative 32%. That doesn't happen. I mean, people are flipping out and jumping out of a building at a -8, not a -32. I mean, it's going to take years to fit. So because I live in New York City, there are many businesses that are permanently closed. In the United States, we have big retail houses that have been around forever that are going bankrupt. So we can't hide and say we have to just stay sheltered in place, and and just let big government just hand us a check, because where's that money coming from? I mean, if you have a deflating economy printing more and more money, that is a recipe for destruction. That's a recipe for Venezuela.
French Revolution, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Weimar Republic. You can simply go through the list historically and see where you are. And listen, I'm with you 100%. It's really, really tough. But by God, we had a largely bullshit economy. Like, I'm sorry for this rant as well, but come on. You walk through the mall, it's like, how much of this shit do people really need? Come on. Do you need 9 shoe stores in a mall? Do you need all of it? Do you need different color luggage for every trip you damn well go on? Do you need all of this frou-frou bullshit? Do you need jelly soaps that you can throw around in the shower? Do you need face scrubs of this particular sea anemone from the South Seas? Or like, do you need all of this crap? And I get it. Like, I mean, it's really tough, this kind of transition, but we've had this weird, psychotic, coked up bullshit economy for a long time. And this is something we can't It's like some wealthy guy. Every time he gets in trouble, he just sprays money around. He's like, hey, man, I got off the parking ticket. Hey, man, I got off the drunk driving charge. Hey, man, I beat a guy up, but I paid him not to sue me. Hey, and then suddenly, boom, something comes along and his money can't buy his way out of it. And that's when he begins to grow the hell up. You can't just wallpaper your money out of stuff. And yeah, the economy shrank 33%, but they're going to add $5 to $6 trillion of debt in America just in this fiscal year, which is completely discrediting, of course, to the Republican Party that was supposed to be so horrified at what Barack Obama was doing to the national debt. They say, oh, yes, but we have COVID. It's like, yeah. And before COVID, there was a housing crash. And before that, there was a stock market crash in the tech sector. And before that, there was another housing crash. And before that, there was the Vietnam War. And before that was the Korean War. There's always some damn reason why we can't just save right now. And so this entire, sorry to be so coarse, but this entire bullshit bubble economy, it's like, yeah, we kind of got to get back to basics, making stuff that actually adds value to our lives rather than painting yet another piece of bullshit lacquer on our bullshit fingernails so we look pretty on the subway. It's stupid stuff.
Well, here you're hitting a great point, all right? Every time the banking industry is having a crisis, they need the central bank to print more money, all right? And you know that whole mechanism, you know, the fractional reserve and all that and how that works. So the feds make this hot money that gets pumped into the banks so they can stay afloat, all right? But to prevent the hyperinflation that we're talking about, you have to have more goods in the society to buy, all right? That's a way to kind of suppress the hyperinflation, okay? If you start to reduce the number of goods in the society, that means you have more dollars chasing less goods, all right? And that's where you start, it'll reach a certain critical mass, a certain inflection point, and then the hyperinflation is going to hit. So I agree with you from a philosophical point of view that, you know, less is more, and you know, the majority of Western society has way too many goods, way too many optionality for each item at Williams-Sonoma, and you know, the society has gone overboard with this stuff, and we need to get back to basics. The idea of making products that aren't planned obsolescent. And, you know,
like if another yoga leggings company goes out of business, I actually, frankly, have no problem with that because I'm tired of seeing women standing in line at an ice cream store where I feel like I'm a gynecologist for a mannequin made of plastic. Like, I just don't want to see all this stuff. Cover some stuff up. It won't kill you. I don't want a guy wearing such tight leggings that I know whether he's circumcised or not. Like, these are just things that I don't want in my life. Now, this is just a personal preference of mine. Obviously, some people like it, but I don't know. This monkey bonobo butt show and stuff, I could stand it. And maybe it's just because I got a daughter who's going to be hitting puberty at some point soon, but it's just like, can we get a little, I'm not saying we got to go all the way back to Amish land for modesty and so on, but you know, maybe we could find better uses. Hey, how about growing some food once in a while? You know, even if you live in a city, grow a little food. Do something that's practical and valuable and not just like vanity based. You know, I mean, if all the tattoo shops close down, it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we've got better uses for ink, like writing books on philosophy than, you know, mistranslating Japanese things to put on your forehead.
This is no. You're hitting the right points here. You know, that society has tipped over the edge, you know, and I don't know if we're ever going to come back. You know, I don't know. I mean,
I don't want to.
Are we? You know,
I don't want to go back.
No. I mean, well, I mean, I'm thinking that are we the Roman Empire, and that, you know, we're actually seeing the crumbling of the empire. You know, I don't know.
Yes, we are. Yeah, without it. Yeah, no, so, I mean, without a doubt, you know, I've been sort of backing off from politics lately, and part of that is the deplatforming stuff, but also part of it is just like, I've really been sort of thinking about like all the people, like the Roman Empire took like, you know, 300-400 years to fall, right? So, oh man, so many people were like, I know exactly what the problem is, man. There's the welfare state. We got these open borders thing. We got incompatible cultures. We've got massive debt, debasement of currency. You know, nobody has to make any tough decisions. We're getting soft. Everybody knew for close to half a millennia, everybody knew exactly what the problem was with the Roman Empire. And people wrote about it, and they went into politics about it. And what did it do that they knew all this stuff? What did it do?
Right.
Nothing. Because what value does rhetoric and sophisticated language and passionate arguments? I know I'm making one now, but, forgive me for forgetting my own advice for 30 seconds. But what value does all of this language have about, we need sound currency, and we need responsible this, and government debt's too high, and we need to let the free market determine interest rates, because otherwise, investors get the wrong decisions about deferred spending. Like, I get all of the Austrian economics. I'm a huge fan of, and I think it's great. I love the market economy and so on. It's like, yes, but the fact is that we have about half the population in the West that is utterly dependent upon government money. And you can come up with all the theories that you want, but basically, if you talk about a rational economic system, those people look at you like you're coming at them to take out their kidneys with a spork. Like, they're just not going to react positively. And no matter what language you use for all of this stuff, they're simply like, no, I need that stuff to live. I can't live without it, man. So whatever you say, I'm going to go to the wall, and I'm going to riot, and I'm going to burn things down if I don't get my stuff. And I'm like, yes, but I have sophisticated argument. It's like, yeah, well, sorry, man. I mean, I need my stuff. And it's like trying to talk to a junkie. You can talk. You've probably had this experience once or twice. Someone's addicted to something. You say, hey, man, that's really bad for you. It's like, yeah, I need it. It's like, you really shouldn't have it. Yeah, I need it. And if you get in my way, there'll be a me-sized hole in the middle of you, because I need to get through you to get to the thing. And so, I'm on the fence about, like, the value of language in a situation where people are just addicted to fiat currency to the point where they either feel or genuinely can't live without it.
Well, I've been trying to promote the idea of action and not talk. I keep on pushing on my. I keep on. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I keep on pushing on my channel and other channels that I'm on, that action. We're at a point now that the rhetoric is important, but action is more important. For example, with George Floyd, right? Follow me with the argument here. With George Floyd,
okay, I'm with you. I'm with you.
So with George Floyd, there was obviously all these riots, the BLM riots, and and the Antifa infiltration and everything. There was some police brutality involved in these minority communities, and I understand that that's an atrocity. But think about what just happened. There was one person there. It was based on some police brutality. He dies, and many businesses were smashed up and looted. Tens of thousands of people were rioting and burning down cities in the United States, literally. New York was one of them. And there is
$1 million worth of property damage.
Yeah, and they're still looting right now in Chicago because there was another
reparations. But yeah, I think that legally it's called looting. Yeah.
Yeah. So AOC thinks it's stealing for bread, but what they're really doing is stealing for a TV and a Gucci bag. It's not stealing for bread, and unless they know how to convert a TV into something to eat. But the thing is that they're stealing items and they're using police brutality as an excuse. All right. Now, when we have a society that finds that stealing is okay, killing, no matter where you are on the spectrum, but killing an unborn fetus right before birth is okay, then the society is gonna get slapped metaphysically, down. And I think we are losing the ethic that our grandparents had. And that's why I keep on trying to go back to the Greatest Generation, and maybe they're put on a pedestal a little bit too much, but I think it's important to kind of what were some of the lessons learned with the Greatest Generation? You had a lot of people that during the war, World War II, right at the beginning, they enlisted. My grandfather was one of them. And they enlisted and served their country with with honor and dignity. All right. And my grandmother, she left Europe just before the Nazis came into town. She was able to leave with her father, but her mother and brother were left to die. All right. They went through that ordeal. They went through the ordeal of the Great Depression. My grandmother was so worried about stuff, that she, if there was a hole in a piece of cloth, even though she had some money, she would sew it. Or, she didn't put money in the bank. She put them in coffee cans. So the thing, and, she had a garden, and the point is that there was a level of built-in austerity within the way they saw the world because of what they experienced. They experienced the Holocaust. They experienced World War. They experienced, a Great Depression. All right. And the majority of Western society, especially in North America, hasn't seen that in any shape or form like our grandparents. So, we've kind of like lost our way in terms of understanding what is important. When you see half of your family die in a war, your perspective on life is a lot different than, the current generation, where the most important thing is if Johnny, is doing well in his soccer game. So we don't have the right perspective. So it adds into, do we have the big house? Do we have 5 cars? Do we, is the kids going to Ivy League school, and yada, yada, yada. And then we're losing the connection of what is important between individuals, the human connection, but also the human connection to the earth. When you buy things, I know this sounds a little kind of like woo-woo, but when you just go to the grocery store and buy your tomatoes, and you're not growing your food, you're losing that energy connection and seeing it grow over time, only to harvest it in the right season. And then you're taking that energy, you're putting energy into the ground to take care of. And then it's being brought back to you for energy. And so we have this now modern convenience world, and we've lost tune to that connection with the earth. And I'm finding people in the United States, it's very few, but they are starting to wake up and say, I'm going to leave the city, or I'm going to leave suburbia, and I'm going to get some land in the Midwest, and I'm going to be in a rural area. There are some people, not enough, but there are some that are moving in that direction, and they're seeing that this society is spinning out of control. And I see that, I know on your previous program before we started doing this, there was a little bit of a hint of religion and philosophy tied together here. But something very similar is taking place with the story with Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot leaves Sodom and Gomorrah because the angels warn him. Well, something big is happening in our world at large, in our big metropolises. It's being plagued. I mean, we hear about asteroids, we hear about floods, we hear about super volcanoes, we have pandemics, we have locusts, we have dams, busting in China. I mean, every possible thing that could possibly happen this year seems to be happening. It's, to me, that's almost like reading right out of the Torah, the plagues of Egypt.
That's just straight out of Revelations. Yeah, no, there's no question. I mean, I think it's Air Sharks next. It's like Sharknado turns out to be a documentary, not, it's going to be like the shark dorsal fins in the fields of wheat. That's probably the next thing that's going down. And the destruction of the cities is foundational to the end of easy money, right? Because cities are built upon debt, usually. I mean, not rational cities, but the modern cities all built upon debt. And the people who are like, these aren't accidental things that are happening in the cities. They are specifically the destruction of the core of what props up the current system, which is the city. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out how it plays out from here, because you destroy a bunch of shops, you loot a bunch of shops, and what happens? They're not going to reopen. Of course they're not. Even if the people want to reopen them, they can't get any insurance, and you can't operate in America without insurance. So then what happens is there are no grocery stores, there are no stores for healthcare, there are no pharmacies or anything like that. And then people are like, oh my God, I gotta go other places to get anything done, and it wrecks people's day. And then people say, but capitalism has failed you and the system has failed you, and we've got to go for something really radical and different. And it really starts to radicalize. And people in the cities have this weird belief that somehow farmers just send food in out of the goodness of their hearts. And because the attacking of the supply chain is really important. Like, why is it that they're blocking the arteries? Why is it that they're blocking the highways? Why is it that they're attacking trucks? Because trucks are the lifeblood of the city. You send food in so you get money out, so you can buy stuff that was made in the city usually, right? But if the money becomes relatively worthless, or if it becomes too dangerous, and farmers are already threatening this. This is not my imagination. If I can't come in, if I can't get insurance to come into the city, if I can't, if I'm going to get attacked, I'm not coming into the city. And then guess what? It turns out your little rooftop thyme garden isn't going to be quite enough to give you the 2,500 calories a day you need to keep body and soul together. This is an attack upon the civilization that we have, which is city-based. And, whether we end up in this Fight Club scenario where you're hunting deer in the shadows of the ex-World Trade Center or whatever, I don't know. But there is, without a doubt, there is and this is what happened in Rome, right? You finally, you debase the currency enough, you can't pay your soldiers enough, you can't pay your mercenaries enough, they come and take it, sack it. Rome went from 2 million to 17,000 in less than a year. That the depopulation, everybody streams out of the country because the city relies upon such a complex web of supply chains that, people don't even notice that shipping has largely stopped around the world. And sailors are kind of impounded in places. They're going kind of crazy, and people don't want that job anymore. You don't want to be a trucker if you're not going to be able to get through. You can't drive through people because you're going to go to jail. You can't stop because you're going to get attacked. You can't turn around because there's people behind you. People don't like those impossible situations. And the moment that magic automatic conveyor belt perceived in the city, just bringing stuff in, the moment that starts to get threatened, people are going to get this completely Viking base of the spine chill, which is like, oh my God, I rely on this incredibly complex web of social trust, and people are just hacking at it and hacking at it and hacking at it. And it is a lot more fragile than people think. And the inability of the police forces, the inability or unwillingness, is really a lack of will rather than it is a lack of capacity. People don't understand, man. You hammer at the base of these cities' infrastructure. You hammer at the capacity of people to get food in the city. You hammer at the capacity of the supply chains to feed the endless more of the city dwellers. And you can go from urban to rural in less than a year. And that is a huge change. Now, of course, a lot of people would really regret that. But I've always been able to tell, Paul, I'll tell you this, man. I've always been able to tell somebody who's never worked with their hands. I've always been able to, my whole life, because I worked, as you probably heard, I worked up north a year and a half, gold panning, prospecting. I had a lot of manual labor jobs when I was younger, man. You want to see completely screwed up people with their heads up their asses who live in a world of books and sophistry and propaganda and nonsense. You just look at people who've never been able to out-talk a situation because it's brute nature. You're out there 3 days away from a hospital. You slip when you're drilling something and you hurt yourself badly, you're probably going to die because it takes you're 3 days away from a hospital, man. You're going to bleed out. You're going to get an infection. Something bad is going to happen. You have to be really careful, and you can't talk yourself in and out of this stuff. And this goes back, I think, to what we were talking about earlier, which is we have something here now. We can wallpaper over some of it with money, but the reality is that we can't talk our way out of this one. And that is when people begin to grow up.
Yeah. Well, some people will grow up, some people won't. That's the problem. It's not everybody's growing up.
Some people will grow up, the rest of us will have to arm up, I suppose.
Well,
okay, let's talk a little bit about some of the predictions that I mean, I was there too, so I'm not putting this all on you, but some of the predictions in terms of death count and fatalities and illnesses and so on were pretty alarming early on. They haven't played out. Again, I'm not sure where we were relative to your, and again, I don't want to say your, I was there too, and I was nodding along with it, so I'm not going to sort of put it all on you. But where do you think you stand with regards to earlier predictions of things like mortality and so on, and what do you think has changed that has played out with it being less than we thought?
All right, the latest prediction I made before the shelter in place was starting to be instituted was, and it was a pretty bogus prediction, all right? I said 165 million Americans would contract COVID-19, and that 6.5, roughly about 6.5 million would die from it. All right, that's what I stated, but I also said that it would happen in 18 months. We're not there yet, all right? That meant there was going to be 3 waves, and that shelter in place would not work. And so there were a few caveats, and that the medical establishment would implode, that it would break down, and that we would not have medical care because the first responders would be sick and be taken out. That was the assumption, all right? That was before we knew prophylactically that hydroxychloroquine could be used. That was before smashing the curve with shelter in place and all these things. So that's, where that was the bold prediction in late February, around February time. Now, where I'm at right now is there is a second wave, okay, in the world, all right? But I've been focused more on the United States, North America and the United States. And that inflection point took place on June 11th, all right? And there's been papers published in Cell journal, the journal Cell, prestigious journal, talking about a mutation called the D614G mutation. And that mutation allows for the spike protein to stay in the body longer and it doesn't shed. The first wave that the majority of the New Yorkers went through was the D614 version. Well, everyone that's getting it now in the United States is the G614 spike protein version. And that stays in the body longer. And physicians are saying it's more chronic, it's staying in the body longer. Even if you get the plasma transfusions, you may get better and then it flares back up.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this the 5 to 50? I've heard 5%, I've heard 15%, and ranges in between of the long haulers, right? Of the people who, like, they get COVID, even if they test negative, they still have exhaustion, they have loss of sense of taste, they have disorientation, they have hearing loss, they have, just really, really debilitating symptoms. And some people are pushing, 3, 4, 5 months.
Right. These are the chronic, and the ones that have the chronic infections or have the chronic illness, right. So, but again, it's not cookie cutter. Certain cohorts are going to have these types of situations. Some of them that had severe lung damage will need lung transplants in 10 years. All right. And that's not, the doctors that are looking at this have stated this. It's like the amount of fibrotic scarring is such that you will not have a functioning lung in 10 years.
Why does it take 10 years for that to play out?
Well, because because you never really heal, and you're slowly losing capacity of the lung, and there's reinfection, and then because you're constantly breathing in pathogens, right? But if you have a working lung and a working immune system, you're fighting it. But if you're already sick or seriously, compromised, that the organ is seriously compromised, then you're not going to be able to fight the normal things that you're around. And you can see this with people that have asthma or COPD when they're older. They start to decline quicker. This is the reason. This is that all this fibrotic scarring, it's reduced the capacity of the lung, the ability to fight infection. You're already compromised, and eventually you will need a lung lobe removed or a whole lung replaced. And unfortunately, a lot of these individuals the damage is on both sides. It's bilateral. It's
I
not
wanted to mention this
unilateral.
as well. So the CDC said over 1/3 of COVID-19 patients who aren't hospitalized have long-term illness. And again, I know these numbers are all over the place because it's still kind of early in the whole life cycle of this pandemic, but it's pretty bad. You got a lot of people with heart damage, a lot of people with kidney damage. Actually found even 80% of people who had no kidney issues before, significant proportions of them end up with kidney damage as a result of this as well. And this is what we talked about earlier. This son of a bitch just gets everywhere in your system.
Mm-hmm. It'll affect the spleen. It's going to affect the liver. It's going to affect the kidneys. It's affecting the nervous system. It's affecting the heart. It's multiple organs. But, a lot of people kept on saying it's just pulmonary. And at the very beginning, it made sense to say that, because the ACE2 receptors, that were infected were primarily in the lung. But as the more understanding of this virus takes hold, it is more about a blood disease. It's the erythrocytes, the red blood cells are blowing up, and it's clotting, and so you have heart attacks and strokes, and the spleen is working overload to try to filter out this damaged blood, and the T cells are infected too. So this is people don't understand, but it's a connective tissue disease. I mean, blood is a connective tissue, and a lot of people wouldn't think of it that way, but it is. So it's it's not just a pulmonary disease. It is a blood disease, and we need to investigate more what's going on with the bone marrow, because that's where your blood is produced, is in the bone marrow. Is it infecting is it infecting the stem cells?
Right. And there was an article as well. I wanted to mention this. Over 40% of US adults are susceptible to severe COVID-19 because, of course, the underlying conditions tend to be, like the domino effect, right, of what causes people to go down. So 40.7% of US adults have an underlying condition. The most common, of course, at almost 31% is obesity, which is a BMI. I know it's not perfect, but greater than or equal to 30. So obesity, almost 31%. Diabetes mellitus, I don't know what the mellitus means. I'm sure you could tell me, but 11.4%. Chronic.
The mellitus is with the insulin. Diabetes. Okay. Yeah.
So COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder or disease, 6.9%, heart disease, 6.8%, chronic kidney disease, 3.1%. If you put all of those together, and there's some overlap, of course, 40.7% of US adults are susceptible to severe COVID. And actually, you and I talked about this pretty early on, which is, try and get your health back into some sort of reasonable shape. I mean, for itself as a whole, but also because it is going to be rougher if you get COVID.
Right. Right. Oh, the comorbidity is a major issue, and I keep on saying, and to Mike Adams' credit, he is sounding the alarm as best as he can too. It's just like, get that D3 and the vitamin C and the turmerics, and it sounds like a sales pitch, but I'm telling you, there is a lot of evidence that shows that supplementation will boost your immune system, and exercising, eating right, staying away from pesticides and, the glycosates and all this stuff, and, getting proper nutrition goes a long way. I mean, if you're going to feed your body garbage and you're not at the right nutritional supplementation level, when you do get a pathogen in your body, it's harder to fight. But if you're eating the right foods, have the proper, diet and exercise and supplementation, that is an extra boost to your immune system, that when it needs that energy to fight it, it has it. So this is part of the reason why people grow older quicker. It's because their system, their metabolism is running low. There's lots of research that if you take tissue samples and look at the histology of the cells of an elderly individual versus someone that's younger, that the number of mitochondria is drastically diminished in an elderly person. And by supplementation and reducing oxidative stress, all right, it's called ROS, reactive oxygen species. But if you reduce ROS, that will upregulate mitochondria, and the mitochondria is your ATP. So this is why people that say, oh, I'm working out and I feel I have more energy. Well, that's because your body is saying, I need more mitochondria, and it's producing more ATP, and it's a positive feedback loop. All right. But it can go in reverse too. If you don't use it, your mitochondria starts to wear down and start to die off, not to replicate in the cell as much, and it's producing less ATP. And if there's not enough ATP in the cell, then it can't do its operations. So it's very simple. And so if it can't do its operations, then when you get infection, it can't fight it very well. So it's, in essence, just get your body producing more ATP. It sounds like, huh? But that's how it works. Your body needs the ATP to run, to do all of its functions, to do phosphorylation, to do ion pumps, everything that's going on. You shut down that ATP, you're shutting down your body. Same thing in the economy. You shut down businesses, and then the entrepreneurial spirit, you shut down the society. That the ATP of the society is the entrepreneurial spirit.
Right. And I think it's important for people to remember, when you get lost in the days numbers, and I, of course, have been checking the numbers, I guess, fairly regularly, but boy, these numbers in the US are going, pretty high pretty quickly. It only took, 6 weeks to add another million?
Right. This is right.
Yeah, it's really going high pretty quick.
Yeah, this is why I was mentioning earlier about the inflection point on June 11th. That's the beginning of the second wave. The first wave, obviously starts late February, peaks in March, late March or so, and then starts to come back down. Now I'm looking at the United States as an aggregate. In some states, you may see the curves more exponential. Other states, you see it, come down and then come up. So, but if you look at the aggregate of the data, this is that DG mutation that I was telling you about. And that inflection point starts in June, on June 11th, and then it starts to ramp up. Now, the reason why it's higher is a few reasons. There's more testing, so there's more cases. All right, that's one reason. There's more confirmed cases, but that doesn't explain, just because of you're testing more and you get confirmed cases, you also have hospitalizations going up. That's the more important number to look at, not just the confirmed cases. It's the hospitalizations, because that means it's serious. All right, it involves more care from the first responders. So those went up, and part of the reason is that, one, we already have a society that is getting weaker by being sheltered in place. People have been gaining weight. They're not working out. They're depressed. When people are depressed, they're going to eat their bonbons, and Kit Kats, So the nutrition is going down. Their exercise is going down. There's not one time.
And I was saying that the domestic violence is up. Kids who are in difficult households don't even get the escape or relative escape of school. The kids, of course, aren't getting structured exercise. Like when I was a kid, it was just, you get on your bike, you just roam around the neighborhood but people don't feel comfortable with that anymore. And so it's all structured stuff. The kids don't have the structured stuff. Friends of mine, kids who, played basketball and volleyball in school, they don't have any of that at the moment. And it's really, really tough to get them active.
Well, there's an individual, I don't want to say where, I don't want to say their name, but there's an individual that, no, my heart goes out to him, but there's an individual that's on YouTube that recently went through a divorce. Okay. And the kids are now gone. He's alone. He's in his 20s, mid 20s. And now there's substance abuse issues. And it's looking like he's spiraling down to like a suicidal kind of thing. And this is a very real situation that's happening that not enough channels are talking about. It's the mental health issue of the loss of the job, being sheltered in place for so long, like you said, the domestic violence issues. There's, you know,
I mean, it's tough. It's tough for the single people, right? I mean, it's tough for the single people because they can't go out and socialize. They can't go out on dates. They, you know, so they really are alone. And, you know, we're dogs, not cats, man. We get a little nuts if we spend too much time alone. And, you know, loneliness is what, a pack of cigarettes a day in terms of its ill effects on health. So, yeah, again, we're trying to find some magic way out of this. Like we can get this Band-Aid off without experiencing any pain. And I mean, at some point, we're just going to have to say, no, we got to just choose the lesser of two evils. But the idea that we can get out unscathed is a complete fantasy at the moment.
Mm-hmm. That's why on my channel, back on in February, in March, I had a healthcare worker, mental health care worker, actually from Canada. She's on the west side of Canada. Her name's Linda. And she said that if anyone wants to talk, you know, just contact her and she'd work you through, you know, whatever problems you have. So, you know, if all you got to do, you know, if you want to contact her is just go to YouTube, type in my name and Linda, and those videos will pop up and her contact information is in the description. And she's, you know, she wants to help people. I mean, that's what she does. But it is a very real issue that people have. There's a psychological component here that needs to be discussed and addressed.
And even therapists a lot of them won't see anyone in the office anymore. So you can do it this way, I suppose, which is not quite the same as human contact. But yeah, I had a doctor friend who was like, yeah, some of the older women, they come in, they don't really have anything wrong with them. They just want to chat and, you know.
Well, yeah, you know, and that just talking helps. I mean, you know, and in a strange way, and maybe you've had this thought already, you know, but people tune in to hear us, and I say us in the larger sense, on YouTube, you know, because they need that human connection. They need one to get some information, other people's perspectives, but this is becoming their daily routine to tune in to Stefan or myself or whoever. You know?
Yeah, no,
and we're part of their family.
Yeah, I do get a lot of messages from people who are like, you know, I'm kind of stuck at a crazy tribe, but, you know, it's great to know that there's a voice of reason out there who's willing to say it as it is and all that. And that sort of touchstone of just reality check and so on, it is pretty essential for people because we wouldn't normally have access to this wider social network. And yeah, you do kind of slot into people. And I think it's a good thing that we're doing to talk to people in a way that helps them remember that they're not crazy, even if they're surrounded by crazy people. All right. Well, let's close off with this, if that's all right. I really appreciate your time tonight, Paul. The fall. Because, you know, we got a second wave going on and France is going the wrong way and Florida ain't looking good. And there's a lot of stuff, especially with younger people in Florida these days, getting sick more. But it's still outdoor breezy time, you know. I mean, people aren't stuck indoors. You don't have kids all congregating. And there's a school in Georgia where the kid took a photo of the hallway. Nobody was social distancing. Nobody was wearing masks. The kid got suspended for, you know, whatever, right? And then they put her back in, but now there's like 6 confirmed cases in the school or something like that. So I think the fall is not going to be good, particularly in the northern climates here, because everyone's, you know, you can all gather outdoors, but that's going to change, you know, come late fall. And it's just, to me, too cold to be outside. What do you think is going to happen with regards to the schools and the kids and the fall? I mean, that's going to, especially New York too, for you, it's too cold to be outside and all that. So people are going to go back in, right? And that's funny because people say, well, it's called a cold. And it's like, yeah, it's cold because it happens in the winter months because everyone's indoors. It's got nothing to do with being cold. They've actually put people to baths and exposed them to colds that didn't get sick at all, and only to do with being indoors. Is why there's very little colds in the summer, very little summer flu and so on. So what's the story in the fall, do you think?
Well, the grade schools, when they go back to school, and some of them are going back to school already, in the fall, there's going to be more cases. Now, the far majority of those cases are going to be not severe, but there will be some that are severe. I mean, there's some stats. There was a paper that just came out, and they were stating that the young ones about anywhere from, depending on the state in the United States, anywhere from 0.5% to 5.3% of the total COVID-19 confirmed cases, those young ones would need to be hospitalized. So that kind of gets you like the severity of this, all right? Some of it in some areas could be not so severe. In some areas it could be very severe. If it's your own child, it could be devastating, obviously. So we're going to see more infection that's going to take place, but it's going to be masked or exacerbated because of influenza. Because we haven't been hit by, right now we're just going through the COVID virus, the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, right? We're going to be hit in the fall with SARS-CoV-2, your normal influenza, and your normal garden variety coronavirus. All right. And if you already have individuals that are somewhat sick by influenza or the normal cold, and then they're around someone that happens to have COVID-19, then your R0 values may go up. Mm. You follow me? So because now like we've said, it's important to boost your immune system. Well, if you're going through the cold season, all right, your immune system has gone down, right? And the susceptibility for spreading the virus will increase, or the probability of it. So I suspect that the R0 value will go up a little bit. Right now it's like 1.1, depending on who you talk to, but it's like 1.1, it could be 0.9 in some areas. If you're in a down tick like in New York, it's less, but if you're in an uptick like California or Florida, it's more than 1.1, but let's just say it's 1.1, all right? So for every one person that has it, another person will get it. So it's going to slowly creep up. All right. Now, when we're in the cold season and people are somewhat compromised by just the garden variety cold stuff, then that R0 value is probably going to notch up to 1.5, maybe 2. So that means for every one person that has COVID-19, it's going to spread to 2 people. Because part of that,
that's just because they're already immunocompromised with the flu or the cold or whatever it is, right?
Right. Okay. That's the point I'm making, because it's about viral load.
It never crossed my mind. Just be honest with you, like it should have, completely obvious. Never crossed my mind.
Like for example, for a simple mind experiment, if I had theoretically one viral particle, and I put it into your nose or into your throat, the chances of you getting, and that was SARS-CoV-2, the chances of you actually contracting COVID-19 is like very, very, very small. Even if I put 2 viral particles in, very small probability. But you got to inch it up to a certain viral load before you actually get the virus.
And that's what people don't understand about masks, is it's not designed to completely bulletproof protect you, but if it reduces the viral load, either going out or coming in, it's going to do you some good.
Right, exactly. But now that's one part of the differential equation. It's about the viral load, but it's also about your immune system. If it's low, then the amount of virus that needs to come into your body to take hold is less. But if you have a very strong immune system, you can take a larger viral load. up to a certain point. I mean, there's within reason. I mean, if you drink a bucket of this stuff, obviously, no matter what you're, some people think, oh, if I, I'm taking vitamin C and I could drink a bucket of, COVID-19 and I'll be fine.
Worst
No, I
frat
mean,
hating ever. I just want to point that worst frat ever. Right. Okay.
no, but the thing is that, but it's a differential equation. It's about rates of change. Okay. And that a lot of people can't think that way. They didn't take, some of the higher mathematics, but it's about rates of change, and it's a multivariable problem. And viral load is a big component, and the immune system of that individual that is contracting that virus. That's a big component. And that's why I keep on saying that boost your immune system is one of the most important things that an individual can do to prepare for the fall. Because if you don't do that, you're in a worse situation.
Do you think that the schools are going to, my gut says, which is nonsense, obviously, but I just tell it anyway, right? My second brain, my brachio brain, or whatever you want to call it, but my gut says there's no way that these schools can stay open. And it's not because the kids are going to get super sick. I get, that the kids have obviously some weird anti-vampire immunity to this kind of, still not immunity, but they're less susceptible to some of they don't go into the cytokine storm and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Having these kids all in there and, they're kids. Oh, the mask is going to be uncool. And it's just going to be like vector spread, and let's get back to teaching on grandma's knee, or it just seems like, how could this possibly work?
The question that you brought up in some of the background, we could talk about this for 3 hours. All right. It's that deep, but yeah. I'm trying to unpack it the best that I can for the audience, but in a strange way, them being super spreaders may be what we need for herd immunity. By spreading it and getting it out, like mankind.
Well, then we're back to, what was the point of flattening the curve? We should just got full Sweden and let this thing rampage like wildebeest across the landscape to begin with. Sorry.
Well, no, you're right. You're right. But at the time when we were thinking about what we should be doing, we didn't know what we were dealing with. There was a big unknown. Now we have the knowledge of hindsight of what we're dealing with. And I think that going through herd immunity with boosting up your immune system with supplementation is the best policy, and making sure that doctors have all the tools in the toolbox to be able to treat. And by doing that is, one, we will start building naturally the antibodies in our society instead of having it forced into the society through a forced vaccine program that would prevent the ID passport, and forcing people.
Effects, which we talked about, the 2% or whatever it's going to be, 1.5 to 3%, those negative effects won't occur if the antibodies are produced in a more natural way, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So so by doing this policy, you are attacking the virus biologically, and you're also attacking the sociological things that are happening. If the kids go to school, the parents can go to work. But if the parents can go back to work, but the kids can't go back to school, who's going to take care of the kids? So there's that issue. Well, who's going to do the daycare?
My argument to that is have the mom stay home with the kids. It's going to drive up the wages of the dad back to 1950s level, and everyone can live comfortably on one income again because the demand remains the same. So that's my argument. And plus, we get to transmit our cultural values, and the kids are going to be much better educated, and they won't be indoctrinated, and it's going to be a continuation of Western civilization. So maybe I guess I have a bit of an incentive with the schools not to reopen, but I view, why should everyone go back to work? This is part of the bullshit economy that I was talking about earlier.
Well, yeah, but the thing is again, it's the differential equation. All right, you have to have deflation.
Differential first. Equation is not an argument. Sorry.
Anyway, but the thing is that the deflation has to take place, and a restructuring of the debt would have to happen before you can do that one bread earner type scenario that you're talking about. For example, people have a mortgage, but they qualified for the mortgage because they had a dual income. Okay, that mortgage has been packaged into some sort of mortgage-backed security. Okay,
Boy, they've never been a problem before, have they, Paul? Securities that people have shipped overseas because they're too toxic to handle in the internal economic system. I'm not getting any data here.
But the point is that to get to that point where it's a one-parent earner, you have to unravel this toxic mess that has been, growing since the 70s.
Oh, and that's the thing too. I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, but people are, oh my God, that looter stole the television. It's like, yeah, let's look at the banksters. Let's look at the Federal Reserve. Let's look at the entire parasitical, blood, brain, child-eating, mother-fracking, leeching, industrial strength Javex to the frontal lobes financial system we got going on here. It's a little bit more dangerous than some guy running out of Walmart with a TV. Anyway, that's my last
I agree with you, but the thing is, the unraveling this is like a bear. I mean, it's it's almost impossible to unravel. But that's why I keep on mentioning. I did mention on your show previously is what I call the Biopatriot Act, and that is that they want to have forced vaccines. They want to have militarization of the police with military grade equipment. They want drones. They want 5G, surveillance type.
And they need to get our masks off our faces so they can get facial recognition software everywhere you go.
Well, that's a good point. But and with the forced vaccine program, it ushers in this idea that, well, now you have to have a digital passport. And Bill Gates has mentioned a lot about this in the ID 2020 idea, that you have to prove that you've been vaccinated so you can get your car, your license, or whatever, be able to get on a plane or have a job or whatever. So there is this tracking mechanism that is being instituted. And because the petrodollar is so unstable, just like you mentioned, because of the Federal Reserve and its craziness with printing money, that they're going to move towards a decashing of the society, where we'll no longer have cash and coin. And a lot of people would say, well, big deal. Well, you can take your money out of the bank if you have negative interest rates. When you have a digital currency, you can't take the money out of the banking system and put it under your mattress. That's why I was mentioning my grandmother didn't trust the bank. She put it into a coffee can.
Yep. She'd been through a bank run, I assume, right?
Right. And when you have digital currency and then you have it all tagged, if you don't toe the line of what the government wants, they turn your ability to have transactions off. You can't travel, you don't meet the social scoring or whatever. You and I, and you've experienced it much more than I have at a much larger degree. But if you don't say the right things to the right people, they turn you off on these platforms, right? Now, extrapolate that.
This is such a step forward from hemlock. This is what 2,500 years of civilization has done for us. If they no longer burn down the Library of Alexandria, they no longer burn you at the stake, they don't force you to drink hemlock, they just turn off your channel. It's like, yay, progress. Anyway.
Well, the next step is they're going to turn off your ability. They're going to turn off your ability for commerce. Once the society is decashed, and we're in some sort of social scoring ID passport kind of mechanism, wallet or whatever we want to call it. If you don't toe the line, if you are a dissident, then you're not going to be able to get that job.
It's how you get around the First and Second Amendment. I mean, it's
really, exactly. Yeah. They don't have to take the guns, and they don't have to say you can't have freedom of speech in a law. all they have to do is tell the tech companies, you know what? We don't like this individual saying these sorts of things, so you shut them down. That's why I'm saying that the government doesn't have to institute a policy written in law stating that you're going to have a forced vaccine, because it's going to be through a proxy, through corporations, that they're going to say, we will not allow an employee to work unless they have the vaccine. And no one's going to have any recourse.
I'm not sure, like after seeing what happened to me, Paul, I'm not sure there are a lot of people who are going to be rushing out making documentaries critical of China. Like, I just don't think that's going to be on people's business plan list, even though there's no law that says you can't. But people look at the cause and effect and the consequences and say, maybe I'll choose some other topic or whatever. So yeah, you're right. This kind of soft stuff is pretty powerful.
Right, and this is why I keep on mentioning on my channel and other people's channels when I'm being interviewed and just having conversations like this, is that we have to have an engaged citizen getting out with groups and mentioning the policies that we're talking about, that how they're eroding the civil liberties, and how to, if there's enough individuals that are protesting, similar to what happened with the protests that recently happened with George Floyd, instead of protesting that and breaking down windows and stealing TVs, but they went to their city hall and stated, we will not accept forced vaccines or social scoring or this decashing of our society, that we're not allowing it, and you're not going to erode our Second Amendment or our First Amendments. Then the politicians will have to start paying attention. But they're assuming that we will stay passive because we're worried about our job, or we're worried about, maybe people will make fun of us or whatever it is, but they're betting that we'll be passive. And the lobbying group has captured, just like what Kennedy has said when he was debating Dershowitz about vaccines, the politicians have been captured and not listening to individuals that are voting for them, that literally vote for that congressman or senator. They're just paying attention to the lobbying group. And that lobbying group, unfortunately, in this case, in this big thing, is the banking lobbying group and Big Pharma. Those are the two big ones. And I find it really odd that the Attorney General of New York went after the NRA because the heads of the NRA misappropriated some funds, or at least that's the charge. They have to be found guilty, but they're trying to bring down the whole NRA. Well, why go to that extreme? Why don't you just abolish those individuals and prevent them from being on a nonprofit anymore, and just have them elect new president, vice president, or whoever, whatever level of their executive level was? No, they're going after closing down the NRA. Well, that's the largest lobbying group in the United States supporting the Second Amendment, which happens to be the firewall for the First Amendment. And
so every other amendment and Bill of Rights and everything.
Yeah. So I find that this is a very orchestrated effort by the establishment to try to corral the citizens of the United States to capitulate and usher in socialism and in a one world government. Because with a one world government, it's antithetical to the things that Trump has been saying. The one world government doesn't want borders, because
it doesn't want competition between It doesn't want competition between countries for the smartest and most productive people.
You got it.
Which is why it runs to the federal government, rather than allowing states' rights, because then you get for people that, even Joe Rogan is abandoning California after it enacted all the policies that Joe Rogan likes, and he's moving to Texas. I'm sure he'll advocate for the same policies he fled from California. But if you have more experimentation. I mean, people looked at the historical example, looked at brain drain around the world as everybody hightailed it to America in the 19th century and the first half of first 3/4 of the 20th century, until sort of things got tougher to move to America. But yeah, this competition for smart people, for the Pareto principle geniuses who actually make the economy move, they definitely want to not have competition in people. And one world government will be a chance to eliminate that competition in the same way that the EU eliminated the value of fiscal responsibility for Germany, and if I guess eliminated the value of fiscal responsibility in particular for Greece. And so, yeah, they love having one rule for everything, because, it's like getting rid of your competition, and then you can just start raising the chokeholds to everyone, and there's no place to go.
We as a society are in danger of losing what we have inherited because of previous generations willing to fight battles and to protect that Constitution. And we've been softened up, not willing to fight, not willing to stand up and say, hell no. And we are now at a point where the Democratic Party is doing ads on YouTube saying, please give us some money, so we can get those 4 extra seats in the Senate. Can you imagine if they had the whole legislative branch?
Oh, and they got rid of the
filibuster.
God.
Oh my God. The thing is that the only thing that prevented Trump from not being pulled out of office was the Senate.
Yep.
And if we lose the Senate, then they're going to usher in these policies that we've been talking about.
Oh, they could remake America in 6 months.
Yeah. We're going to see communism in the United States. And it's where we somehow, some way, we have to stop it. And I'm trying to galvanize some of the citizens in the United States the best that I can, and say, decentralize, get organized, and start protesting on these policies that we're talking about. That you don't want these things to happen, because if they do, you're not going to have the country you were born in. You're going to. And it probably will never happen. We probably will never see anything similar to what America was for another 400 years or longer.
I mean, it will take Mars, because America was, to some degree, all due respect to the indigenous population, but it was to a large degree virtual and an intensely philosophical group of men who created the first philosophical society, or philosophically based society, something that didn't just originate out of historical inertia and dominoes crashing and just what you inherit, but was actually a blueprint designed society. It wasn't a renovation, it was a fresh build. And there's no place on earth that you can really do that again. So it'll have to be Alpha Centauri or Betelgeuse or something like that, which, if you get communism, you're never going to get into space anyway, because they'll just consume all the resources for vanity projects. All right. Well, listen, Paul, let's leave it here. Really, really appreciate your time. Let me just, of course, remind you, I'm sure you'd remember to remind people where to get your work on the website and YouTube and so on.
Yes. So I publish quite a bit. The best way to see my publications is on YouTube or Brighteon. So my channels are Paul Cottrell on YouTube, or Dr. Paul Cottrell. I have a backup channel because of the whole demonetization issue. And then Dr. Paul Cottrell on Brighteon. And in the description box are my Patreon accounts and my website, which is the-studio-reykjavik.com. But all you have to do is just go to the YouTube or Brighteon accounts, and it's very easy to get a hold of me.
All right. And I'll put all the links to that below. And just remember, it's Cottrell, 2 T's. So Cottrell, so 2 T's, 2 L's. And really, it's a great pleasure to chat. Thanks again for your friendship and counsel over the months, over this year. And let's do it again soon. And
definitely. I enjoy these conversations. And, if you want to have this as a, a repeated thing every week or every other week or whatever, I'll put it in my schedule and we can do that.
I appreciate that. Very kind, and we'll stay in touch about that. So yeah, check out Old Posting. Great pleasure to chat again, and have yourself a great night.